Imagine this. You are a 15-year-old girl in a bedroom that smells like vanilla candles and yesterday's laundry. It is 2021. The world outside is locked down, your school is closed, and your thumb is doing the only thing that feels normal anymore. Scrolling TikTok. Then you seize her, a girl your age, funny, pretty, and she has a tic. She jerks her head and shouts the word beans. You laugh, you scroll, you watch another, then another. 2 hours pass. You get up for water. And suddenly, without warning, your own neck snaps hard to the left. An electric, involuntary jolt you did not authorize. Your hand smacks the counter. A word escapes your mouth that was never yours. You think it's just a weird muscle spasm. But by the next morning, you cannot stop. And you are not alone. This was not a biological virus. It did not spread through coughs or contaminated surfaces. It was something far more modern and far more difficult to treat. Across the United States, Germany, Canada, and Australia, pediatric neurologists started noticing something terrifying. Clinics that normally saw 1 or 2 cases of Tourette's syndrome per month were suddenly flooded with dozens of teenage girls every single week. These were not slow-developing cases. Doctors were calling them explosive onsets. One day the child was completely fine. The next, she was experiencing full-body convulsions that looked like a permanent neurological disability. But when the doctors looked closer, something was deeply wrong, not just with the children, but with the diagnosis itself. Because these tics were too perfect, too complex, too specific. They did not look like the random neurological misfires of classic Tourette's. They looked like a digital download. The clinical detail of these movements is what blew the case wide open. In a landmark paper published in the journal Movement Disorders, Dr. Kirsten Müller-Wahl and her team documented a chilling pattern. Standard Tourette's tics are simple: a blink, a shrug, a grunt. But these teenagers were performing what researchers began calling TikTok tics. They were shouting specific words like caramel or biscuits in a British accent, even if they lived in Ohio. They were hitting their chests in the exact same rhythm as popular TikTok influencers, performing the same gestures, using the same vocal inflections. It was as if a video file had been directly downloaded into their motor cortex. Their parents were terrified. Their doctors were baffled. The children were physically unable to stop. Their brains had been hijacked by a sequence of pixels on a screen. To understand exactly how this happened, we need to look into the dark corridors of the human subconscious, specifically the mechanism of mirror neurons. We are hardwired to imitate. It is how we learn to speak, to walk, to connect with other humans. But in 2021, the perfect storm was already forming. The isolation of the pandemic had left American teenagers in a prolonged state of extreme stress and sensory deprivation. When the brain is chronically stressed and lonely, its defense filters begin to collapse. It starts desperately searching for a tribe, even a digital one. When these girls spent hours watching Tourette's TikTok, their mirror neurons did not simply observe the content. They synchronized with it. The brain began to treat the tics as social currency, a way to belong in a world where physical belonging had been completely forbidden. Empathy software had overridden physical hardware, and no one had a patch for it. This phenomenon has a clinical name, functional neurological disorder, or FND. Unlike Tourette's, which is a genetic, structural issue in the brain's circuitry, FND is a software problem. Picture a computer with no broken parts. The hardware is perfectly intact. But the operating system has a catastrophic bug that makes the cursor jump erratically across the screen. The TikTok algorithm, with its high-speed cuts, dopamine-engineered loops, and repetitive audio cues, acted as the perfect delivery vehicle for that bug. Every time a vulnerable viewer watched a tic, her brain received a hit of dopamine paired with a physical motor cue. For a brain already compromised by pandemic anxiety, this was the neurological equivalent of pouring gasoline onto an open flame. Standard Tourette's medications did nothing, because you cannot fix a software error with a hardware hammer. But the story gets darker. As the medical community scrambled to find answers, The algorithm did what it was designed to do. It doubled down. Because tic videos were generating millions of views, the platform kept pushing them directly to the most vulnerable users. It became a self-reinforcing loop of disability. The more a girl twitched, the more she searched for others like her. The more she searched, the more the algorithm fed her content that deepened the behavior. There are documented cases of girls whose tics became so violent they could no longer hold their phones, because their own hands would fly up and strike their faces. They were trapped in a room with the very device that was destroying their bodies. This was not just a trend. This was a digital parasite that had found its host population, and the algorithm was its willing, profit-optimizing vector. And here is what makes this case historically significant. It was not the first time humanity experienced mass sociogenic illness, but it was absolutely the first time it traveled at the speed of fiber optic light. In 1518, during the infamous dancing plague of Strasbourg, hundreds of people danced uncontrollably for weeks. Some died from heart failure and exhaustion. The vector back then was religious hysteria and famine. In 2021, the vector was a 15-second video loop, delivered directly to the most psychologically vulnerable demographic in the country. The psychological history of these events reveals a consistent truth. Humans have a deep repressed drive to manifest internal trauma as external physical symptoms. These teenagers were not faking. They were not crazy. They were living through a period of unprecedented psychological pressure, a global pandemic, social isolation, academic collapse, political chaos, and their bodies simply ran out of ways to contain it. The tics were a scream the mouth was not permitted to make. The medical response was both correct and deeply controversial. Doctors began advising these teenagers to delete the apps and stop watching the content. To the families, this felt like being told to just stop being paralyzed. The girls felt every single movement. They felt the muscles' exhaustion from hours of involuntary jerking. They felt the burning shame of shouting obscenities in a Walmart checkout line. But the doctors were technically right, even if their delivery was clinical and cold. The only way to uninstall a software bug is to starve it of its inputs. The treatment was not a prescription. It was a total digital detox. Patients were placed in what clinicians called sensory silence, removed from screens, from algorithm-driven stimulation, from the constant dopamine feedback of social media. They had to retrain their brains from the ground up to believe they were safe, that they did not need this neurological shield anymore. Many of them recovered, but not all. Today, the scars of 2021 remain very real. While most of these teenagers improved once they disconnected from the platform, a significant number were left with permanent neurological vulnerabilities. Their brains had carved a new pathway, a deep groove for tics that, like a trail blazed through a thick forest, is now far easier to travel whenever they encounter significant stress or sleep deprivation. This was not a temporary internet trend. This was an involuntary experiment in human neuroplasticity conducted on children that no one signed a consent form for. It demonstrated something that should shake every single person watching this. Our brains are far more porous than we have ever been told. We like to think our thoughts, our impulses, and our physical movements belong entirely to us. The TikTok tics of 2021 prove that belief is a comfortable illusion. What makes this truly haunting is the absence of malice. The algorithm has no moral compass. It does not distinguish between a pasta recipe and a neurological disorder. It does not know or care whether its next recommendation will make you laugh or make you unable to walk. It only optimizes for one metric: watch time. The engineers who built these systems created something so extraordinarily effective at capturing and holding human attention that they accidentally tapped into the same primitive brain structures that have governed mass hysteria for centuries. This is the defining psychological story of our era. The boundary between online and physical has dissolved completely. We are no longer consumers of screens. We are being actively reshaped by them. The 10,000 teenagers who developed functional movement disorders in 2021 were the canaries in the coal mine, the first documented casualties of a new category of digital pathology. As researchers from Great Ormond Street Hospital in London and the University of Calgary published their findings, one conclusion became impossible to ignore. The beans and biscuits tics were just the surface. The real story is about how completely and how quickly the human mind can be reprogrammed by a sufficiently powerful medium. We used to fear brainwashing through cults or propaganda, systems that required physical isolation and years of conditioning. Now, the isolation comes pre-installed in the device in your pocket. The reprogramming happens quietly, at night, while you are lying in your own bed, in your own home, thinking you are just relaxing. The high energy pull of the next autoplay video is the only hook the brain needs to begin drifting away from its own autonomy. The TikTok tics were not a freak accident. They were a predictable, documented outcome of a technology that understands human biology better than most humans do. So where does that leave us right now? The trend has faded from the For You page, replaced by new aesthetics, new dances, new controversies. But the 10,000 are still out there. Some are still twitching. Some are still afraid of their own nervous systems. And the fundamental vulnerability of the human brain that made all of this possible. It has not changed. We are still using the same platforms, still governed by the same algorithms. Our mirror neurons are still online, still waiting to be triggered. We did not solve the problem. We simply waited for the noise to drop below our threshold of concern. The internet did not just give these kids a disorder. It handed us a preview of a future where our own bodies can be hijacked by a trending topic, and then showed us that we would keep scrolling anyway. So the next time you feel a sudden twitch after a long session of mindless scrolling, pay attention, because your brain is always listening to what you feed it. And right now, most of us have no idea what we are downloading. If this video made you think twice about what your screen time is actually doing to your brain, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The algorithm won't warn them, but you can.